A guy named Bob receives a free ticket to the Super Bowl from his company. Unfortunately, when Bob arrives at the stadium, he realizes the seat is in the last row in the corner of the stadium. He's closer to the Goodyear blimp than the field. About halfway through the first quarter, Bob notices an empty seat 10 rows off the field, right on the 50-yard line. He decides to take a chance and makes his way through the stadium and around the security guards to the empty seat. As he sits down, he asks the gentleman sitting next to him, "Excuse me, is anyone sitting here?" The man says no. Now, very excited to be in such a great seat for the game, Bob again inquires of the man next to him, "This is incredible. Who in their right mind would have a seat like this at the Super Bowl and not use it?" The man replies, "Well, actually, the seat belongs to me. I was supposed to come with my wife, but she passed away. This is the first Super Bowl we haven't been together at since we got married in 1967. "Well, that's really sad," says Bob. "But still, couldn't you find someone to take the seat? A relative or close friend?" "No," the man replies. "They're all at the funeral." 3 engineers and 3 accountants are traveling by train to a conference. At the station, the 3 accountants each buy tickets and watch as the 3 engineers buy only a single ticket. "How are 3 people going to travel on only 1 ticket?" asks an accountant. "Watch, and you'll see," answers an engineer. They all board the train. The accountants take their respective seats, but all 3 engineers cram into a restroom and close the door behind them. Shortly after the train has departed, the conductor comes around collecting tickets. He knocks on the restroom door and says, "Ticket, please." The door opens just a crack, and a single arm emerges with a ticket in hand. The conductor takes it and moves on. The accountants saw this and agreed it was quite a clever idea. So, after the conference, the accountants decided to copy the engineers on the return trip and save some money, being clever with money and all that. When they got to the station, they bought a single ticket for the return trip. To their astonishment, the engineers didn't buy a ticket at all. "How are you going to travel without a ticket?" says one perplexed accountant. "Watch and you'll see," answers an engineer. When they boarded the train, the 3 accountants crammed into a restroom, and the 3 engineers crammed into another one nearby. The train departed. Shortly afterward, one of the engineers left his restroom and walked over to the restroom where the accountants were hiding. He knocked on the door and said, "Ticket, please." 3 couples, an elderly couple, a middle-aged couple, and a young newlywed couple, wanted to join a new church in their neighborhood. The pastor said, "We have special requirements for new parishioners. You must abstain from having sex for 2 weeks to show willpower." The couples all agreed and came back at the end of 2 weeks. The pastor went to the elderly couple and asked, "Were you able to abstain from sex for 2 weeks?" The old man replied, "No problem at all, pastor." "Congratulations, welcome to the church," said the pastor. Then he went to the middle-aged couple and asked, "Well, were you able to abstain from sex for 2 weeks?" The man replied, "The first week was not too bad, but the second week, I had to sleep on the couch for a couple of nights. But yes, we made it. Congratulations. Welcome to the church," said the pastor. The pastor then went to the newlywed couple and asked the same question. "Were you able to abstain from sex for 2 weeks?" "No, pastor, we weren't able to make it," the young man replied sadly. "What happened, my son?" inquired the pastor. "Well, my wife was reaching for a can of corn on the top shelf and dropped it. When she bent over to pick it up, I was overcome with lust and took advantage of her right there. You understand, of course, this means you will not be welcome in our church," said the pastor sadly. "We know," said the young man. "We're not welcome at Safeway anymore either." A lawyer from New York was transferred to a small frontier during the settlement of the West. After several weeks there, he noticed that the town was populated solely by men. He asked one of the local cowboys, "What do you do when you get the urge for a woman?" The cowboy replied, "See those sheep up on that hill? We just go get us one." "That is disgusting and barbaric," replied the lawyer. After about 3 months, the lawyer could not stand it any longer. He decided, though, if he was going to do a sheep, he would show these yokels how to do it right. He picked out the prettiest sheep of the bunch, bathed her, put a pink ribbon on her, served her hay on a china plate, dressed her in fine lingerie, and then took the sheep to bed. After he finished, he decided to take his newfound lover out for a drink. He wandered into the local saloon with the sheep under his arm. The piano fell silent, people dropped drinks, and all the cowboys turned and stared in shocked disbelief. The lawyer said, "You bunch of hypocrites. You look at me as if I'm some sort of freak for doing what you've been doing all along. I'm just doing it with more class." "That ain't the problem," replied one cowboy. "That's the sheriff's gal you're with." An old man goes to see his priest. He says, "Father, I've experienced a miracle. I think maybe I should be canonized or something." Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Can you describe this miracle? I'm 89 years old, and every night I have to get up 2 or 3 times to go to the bathroom. The last couple of nights before I got out of bed, I prayed that God would turn the bathroom light on for me so I would be able to see where I was going and I wouldn't trip or hurt myself. Go on. Well, since I've started praying, when I open the bathroom door, God turns on the light for me. And when I leave the bathroom, He turns the light off. I don't have to do anything. I tell you, it's a miracle. The priest, interested in the man's claims, but skeptical that the Almighty turns lights on and off for people, decided to call the man's wife. "Hi, your husband just came to visit me. He says that God has been turning the bathroom light on for him in the middle of the night. Have you experienced this phenomenon?" "No, but that might explain the mess in the refrigerator." A visiting professor at the University of Alabama is giving a seminar on the supernatural. To get a feel for his audience, he asks, "How many people here believe in ghosts?" About 90 students raise their hands. "Well, that's a good start. Out of those of you who believe in ghosts, do any of you think you've ever seen a ghost?" About 40 students raise their hands. "That's really good. I'm really glad you take this seriously. Has anyone here ever talked to a ghost?" 15 students raise their hands. "That's a great response. Has anyone here ever touched a ghost?" 3 students raise their hands. "That's fantastic. But let me ask you one question further. Have any of you ever made love to a ghost?" One student in the back raises his hand. The professor is astonished. He takes off his glasses, takes a step back, and says, "Son, all the years I've been giving this lecture, no one has ever claimed to have slept with a ghost. You've got to come up here and tell us about your experience." The redneck student replies with a nod and begins to make his way up to the podium. The professor says, "Well, tell us what it's like to make love with a ghost." The student replies, "Ghost? Dang it, I thought you said goats." There was a guy in a bar one night that got really drunk. I mean, really drunk. When the bar closed, he got up to go home. As he stumbled out the door, he saw a nun walking on the sidewalk, so he stumbled over to the nun and punched her in the face. Well, the nun was really surprised, but before she could do or say anything, he punched her again. This time, she fell down, and he stumbled over to her and kicked her in the butt. Then he picked her up and threw her into a wall. By this time, the nun was pretty weak and couldn't move very much, so then he stumbled over to her, put his face right next to hers, and said, "Not very strong tonight, are you, Batman?" One day, after striking gold in Alaska, a lonesome miner came down from the mountains and walked into a saloon in the nearest town. "I'm looking for the meanest, toughest, and roughest hooker in the Yukon," he said to the bartender. "We got her," replied the bartender. "She's upstairs in the second room on the right." The miner handed the bartender a gold nugget to pay for the hooker and 2 beers. He grabbed the bottles, stomped up the stairs, kicked the door open on the second door on the right, and yelled, "I'm looking for the meanest, roughest, and toughest hooker in the Yukon." The woman inside the room looked at the miner and said, "You found her!" Then she stripped naked, bent over, and grabbed her ankles. "How do you know I want that position first?" asked the miner. "I don't," replied the hooker, "but I thought you might want to open those beers first." In a biology class, the professor was discussing the high glucose levels found in semen. A young female, freshman, raised her hand and asked, If I understand, you're saying there is as much glucose in a man's semen as there is in sugar? That's correct, responded the professor, going on to add statistical info. Raising her hand again, the girl asked, "Then why doesn't it taste sweet?" After a stunned silence, the whole class burst out laughing. The poor girl's face turned bright red, and as she realized exactly what she had inadvertently said, or rather implied, she picked up her books without a word and walked out of class and never returned. However, as she was going through the door, the professor's reply was classic. Totally straight-faced, he answered her question. "It doesn't taste sweet because the taste buds for sweetness are on the tip of the tongue and not in the back of the throat." This guy walks into a pharmacy and says to the pharmacist, "Listen, I have 3 girls coming over tonight. I never had 3 girls at once. I need something to keep me horny, keep me potent." So the pharmacist reaches under the counter, unlocks the bottom drawer, and takes out a small black cardboard box marked with an X and says, "Here, if you eat this, you'll go nuts for 12 hours. The guy says, "Give me 3 boxes." The next day, the same guy walks into the same pharmacy, right up to the same pharmacist, and pulls down his pants. The pharmacist looks in horror as he notices the man's package is black and blue, with skin hanging off in places. The man says, "Give me a bottle of deep heat," to which the pharmacist replies, "Deep heat? You're not going to put deep heat on that, are you?" The man replies, "No, it's for my arms. The girls didn't show up." A Marine colonel on his way home from work at the Pentagon came to a dead halt in traffic and thought to himself, "Wow, this traffic seems worse than usual. Nothing's even moving." He notices a police officer walking back and forth between the lines of cars, so he rolls down his window and asks, "Excuse me, officer, what's the holdup?" The officer replies, "The president is just so depressed about the impeachment thing, he stopped his motorcade in the middle of the beltway and he's threatening to douse himself in gasoline and set himself on fire. He says his family hates him and he doesn't have the $33.5 million he owes his lawyers. I'm walking around taking up a collection for him." "Oh, really? How much have you collected so far?" "So far only about 300 gallons, but I've got a lot of folks still siphoning." A kid comes home from school with a writing assignment. He asks his father for help. "Dad, can you tell me the difference between potential and reality?" His father looks up thoughtfully and says, "I'll demonstrate it for you. Go ask your mother if she would sleep with Robert Redford for $1 million. Then go ask your sister if she would sleep with Brad Pitt for $1 million. Then come back and tell me what you've learned." The kid is puzzled, but he decides to see if he can figure out what his father means. He asks his mother, "Mom, if someone gave you $1 million, would you sleep with Robert Redford?" His mother looks around slyly and then, with a little smile on her face, says, "Don't tell your father, but yes, I would." Then he goes to his sister's room and asks, "Sis, if someone gave you $1 million, would you sleep with Brad Pitt?" His sister looks up and says, "Oh my God, definitely." The kid goes back to his father and says, "Dad, I think I figured it out. Potentially, we are sitting on $2 million, but in reality, we are living with 2 tramps." This man gets laid off from his job, so he tells his wife that in order to pay the bills, she has to work the streets. She reluctantly agrees. He told her he will be in the car across from the corner she is standing on. Sure enough, she's standing as he's watching, and a car pulls up. The driver asks her, "How much for a lay?" She replies, Just give me a sec." She runs across the street and asks her husband. He replies, "Just charge him $100. She runs back and says, $100. The guy in the car says, "Too much. How much for a blowjob?" She once again asks her husband. He replies, "Go charge him $80. The guy in the car once again said, "Too much. How much for a hand job?" Her husband said, "Oh, what the hell, charge him $60. The guy in the car agreed, and as he pulled his massive 11 inches penis, the wife said, "Hold on 1 sec." She ran across the street and said to her husband, "Are you sure we can't lend him $40, sweetheart?" A magician was working on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. The audience would be different each week, so the magician allowed himself to do the same tricks over and over again. There was only one problem. The captain's parrot saw the shows each week and began to understand how the magician did every trick. Once he understood, he started shouting in the middle of the show, "Look, it's not the same hat. Look, he is hiding the flowers under the table." "Hey, why are all the cards the ace of spades?" The magician was furious but couldn't do anything. It was, after all, the captain's parrot. One day, the ship had an accident and sank. The magician found himself on a piece of wood in the middle of the ocean with the parrot, of course. They stared at each other with hate but didn't utter a word. This went on for a day and another and another. After a week, the parrot said, "Okay, I give up. Where's the boat?" Two men and a woman were stranded on an island after a plane crash. They quickly adapted, building a shelter, finding food and water, and generally making the best of their situation. Life was manageable, and they were surviving comfortably. After a month on the island, the woman approached the two men and said, "Okay, guys, let's be honest. I have needs, and you both do too. Let's just get it over with. We'll take turns. One day it's you," she said to the first man, "and the next it's the other." For an entire month, the three of them lived out this arrangement, taking turns and indulging their desires. But tragically, after this month of shared companionship, the woman fell ill from a rotten banana or some other unfortunate cause and died. The two men mourned her loss for a week, and then one of them approached the other. "All right, man, let's be honest. I have needs, you have needs. Let's do it. We'll take turns. One day it's you, the next it's me." And so they spent another month taking turns, enjoying each other's company. But eventually, the first man turned to the second and said, "Okay, man, I need to talk to you." The second man responded, "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing." "We've had a good time," the first man continued, "but I think it's time we stop." The second man nodded, agreeing. "Yeah, I feel the same way. This doesn't feel right anymore." After a moment of quiet understanding, the first man said, "Well then, shall we bury her?" This man responded to an ad in the paper to buy some estate. The ad read that it featured 20 acres of prime bottomland, and since that's what he was interested in, he hurried to look at it. Upon arriving, the owner invited him to look at the rundown house, but he declined, saying it was really the land he was interested in. So the owner told him to walk around and take a good look. He did. And in doing so, he came across an old hand-dug well that he couldn't see the bottom of, so he tossed a rock into it and listened for the splash. He waits, and there is no splash, so he figures that it must have hit the side or something, and he gets a slightly larger rock and drops that in, carefully holding it above the center of the well. He waits. Still no splash. So, damn it, he can't find a bigger rock, but about 10 feet away he sees an old rusty transmission case, and he drops that into the well and listens for the splash. Suddenly he hears galloping behind him, and when he turns his head and glances back, there's this goat headed right for his full speed. Without panic, he deliberately moves off the course of the goat, and in his rearward glance, he sees the goat dive headfirst into the well. Well, he finds that really odd. But not wanting to ponder all of life's mysteries, he just covers the well back up and wanders back up to the farmhouse. He tells the farmer that he found a well on the property, but that while he was looking at it, a goat came charging after him and committed suicide, jumping headfirst into the well. The farmer says, "That's not possible." The man insists that it did happen and says, "Don't you have a goat out here somewhere?" The farmer says, "Yeah, but it couldn't have happened because I had that goat tied to a transmission." A rabbit one day managed to break free from the laboratory where he had been born and brought up. As he scurried away from the fencing of the compound, he felt grass under his little feet and saw the dawn breaking for the first time in his life. "Wow, this is great," he thought. It wasn't long before he came to a hedge, and after squeezing under it, he saw a wonderful sight, lots of other bunny rabbits all free and nibbling at the lush grass. "Hey," he called. "I'm a rabbit from the laboratory, and I've just escaped. Are you wild rabbits?" "Yes, come and join us," they cried. Our friend hopped over to them and started eating the grass. It tasted so good. "What else do you wild rabbits do?" he asked. "Well," one of them said, "you see that field there? It's got carrots growing in it. We dig them up and eat them." This he couldn't resist, and he spent the next hour eating the most succulent carrots. They were wonderful. Later he asked them again, What else do you do? You see that field there? It's got lettuce growing in it. We eat them as well. The lettuce tasted just as good, and he returned a while later completely full. Is there anything else you guys do? He asked. One of the other rabbits came a bit closer to him and spoke softly. There's one other thing you must try. You see those rabbits there? He said, pointing to the far corner of the field. They're girls. We shag them. Go and try it. Well, our friend spent the rest of the morning screwing his little heart out until, completely knackered, he staggered back over to the guys. That was fantastic, he panted. So are you going to live with us then? One of them asked. I'm sorry, I had a great time, but I can't. The wild rabbits all stared at him, a bit surprised. Why? We thought you liked it here. I do, our friend replied. But I must get back to the laboratory. I'm dying for a cigarette. A Western reporter goes to Armenia to write articles about that land. He meets an old man in a village and asks him about any memorable events in his life. The old man says, well, one time my donkey got lost, so me and my neighbors got some vodka and went looking for it. We looked and finally found the donkey. Then we drank the vodka and one by one started screwing the donkey. It was a lot of fun. The reporter figured he couldn't write an article about that, so he asked the old man to tell him another story. The old man said, well, one time my neighbor's wife got lost, so I and all the village men got some vodka and went out looking for her. We looked, and finally we found her. Then we drank the vodka and one by one screwed the neighbor's wife. It was a lot of fun. The reporter, feeling frustrated, told the old man that he couldn't write articles about those stories, and asked him if he had any dramatic or sad memories that he could talk about. The old man paused a little and, with a sad expression on his face, said, well, one time I was lost. Once there was an old rich man who lived up a hill. The old man had 3 gorgeous daughters, so one day he decided to throw a party at his place. Party time came and people were truly enjoying themselves. In the middle of his home, there was an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of crocs. So halfway through the party, he makes an announcement. Anybody brave enough to swim through this pool to the other end gets my 3 daughters. No one makes any. And my personal chopper as well. Still, no one moves. The old man, pretty much enjoying himself, says, okay, not only those, but my houses as well, my cars, my land, and 1 million of my cash. Splash. There was someone in the pool. This guy with long hair looked like Tarzan as he wrestled the crocs, swimming in between them, pulling their tails, etc. When he finally reached the end, he was exhausted and tired. His clothes were ripped apart. He was breathing heavily. The old man ran to greet him on the other side. Son, he says, that was very brave. I'll give you my daughters. Is that enough? No, came the reply. What about my house, cars, choppers, and the cash? Again, no was the reply. Then what the heck do you want in return? Asks the old man. The who pushed me in the pool, was the man's reply. A man went to the doctor, and the doctor told him he had only 24 hours to live. He goes home to tell his wife, and after they both had a long cry over it, he asked her if she would have sex with him because he only had 24 hours to live. Of course, darling, she replied. And so they have. 4 hours later, they are lying in bed, and he turns to her again and says, you know, I only have 20 hours to live. Do you think we could do it again? Again, she responds very sympathetically and agrees to have. Another 8 hours pass, and she has fallen asleep from exhaustion. He taps her on the shoulder and asks her again, you know, dear, I only have 12 more hours left. How about again for old time's sake? By this time, she is getting a little annoyed, but reluctantly agrees. After they finish, she goes back to sleep, and 4 hours later, he taps her on the shoulder again and says, dear, I hate to keep bothering you, but you know I only have 8 hours left before I die. Can we do it one more time? Well, she turns to him with a grimaced look on her face and says, you know, you don't have to get up in the morning, but I do. A man went to the doctor, and the doctor told him he had only 24 hours to live. He goes home to tell his wife, and after they both had a long cry over it, he asked her if she would have sex with him because he only had 24 hours to live. "Of course, darling," she replied. And so they have sex. 4 hours later, they are lying in bed, and he turns to her again and says, "You know, I only have 20 hours to live. Do you think we could do it again?" Again, she responds very sympathetically and agrees to have sex. Another 8 hours pass, and she has fallen asleep from exhaustion. He taps her on the shoulder and asks her again, "You know, dear, I only have 12 more hours left. How about again for old time's sake?" By this time, she is getting a little annoyed, but reluctantly agrees. After they finish, she goes back to sleep, and 4 hours later, he taps her on the shoulder again and says, "Dear, I hate to keep bothering you, but you know I only have 8 hours left before I die. Can we do it one more time?" Well, she turns to him with a grimaced look on her face and says, "You know, you don't have to get up in the morning, but I do." A man goes to a marriage counselor all by himself. Confused, the marriage counselor says, "This is quite odd, as usually this works better when both partners attend therapy together. Since you already paid for this session, I guess we will just have to pretend she is here and role play. I'll be your wife." The man instantly stiffens up and looks very nervous. "Honey, are you not happy in our marriage?" "I can't complain about that." "Is it the relations?" "I can't complain about that either." "Well, is it the way I treat you?" "Nope, definitely can't complain about that." Getting frustrated about the lack of any insight, the counselor breaks character and says, "I don't think this is really going anywhere without your wife present. Why don't you bring her with you?" "No, that won't work at all. It has to be just you and me, no role-playing either." "Well, why is that?" "To you, I can complain." This old couple is driving down the highway when they get stopped for speeding. The man pulls over and the cop walks up to the window and motions for him to roll down his window. The cop says, "I need to see your driver's license and registration," to the old man. The old man nods his head and reaches for his wallet. His wife, who can't hear very well and talks at a very loud level, says to her husband, "What did he say?" The old man cups his hands and says in a very loud voice, "He said he needs to see my license and registration." "Okay," she says. The cop then says to the old man, "What's the hurry? I clocked you going 78 in a 55 zone." The old lady chimes in again, "What'd he say?" The old man responds again with cupped hands and in a loud voice, "He said I was going 78 in a 55 zone, and what's the hurry?" The old lady says again, "Okay." The officer notices that the people are from Alabama and remarks to the old man, "I see that you folks are from Alabama," and, knowing that the old lady can't hear him, adds, "I had the worst piece of ass that I ever had in Alabama." The old lady chimes in again and asks, "What'd he say?" The old man cups his hand and turns to his wife and says, "He says he knows you." Two high school sweethearts who went out together for 4 years in high school were both virgins. They enjoyed losing their virginity with each other in 10th grade. When they graduated, they both wanted to go to the same college, but the girl was accepted to a college on the East Coast, and the guy went to the West Coast. They agreed to be faithful to each other and spend time they could together. As time went on, the guy would call the girl and she would never be home, and when he wrote, she would take weeks to return the letters. Even when he emailed her, she took days to return his messages. Finally, she confessed to him she wanted to date around. He didn't take this very well and increased his calls, letters, and emails trying to win back her love. Because she became annoyed and now had a new boyfriend, she wanted to get him off her back. So what she did is this. She took a Polaroid picture of her having sex with her new boyfriends and sent it to her old boyfriend with a note reading, "I found a new boyfriend, leave me alone." Well, needless to say, this guy was heartbroken, but even more so was pissed. So what he did next was awesome. He wrote on the back of the photo the following: "Dear Mom and Dad, having a great time at college. Please send more money." And mailed the picture to her parents. A wife woke up from her night's sleep and began recounting her dream to her husband. "I dreamt they were auctioning off Dixon teas," she began. The big ones went for a tenner, and the thick ones went for 20. How about the ones like mine? Asked her husband. Those they gave away, she replied, tongue-in-cheek. I had a dream, too, started the husband. I dreamt they were auctioning off fannies. The pretty ones went for 1,000, and the little tight ones went for double that. And how much for the ones like mine? Inquired the wife to her husband. That's where they held the auction, he replied.